Safe Sets, Strike Respect, and Star Trek. Today on episode 230, yes, of Trekland Tuesdays Live with me, Dr. Trek, Larry Nemecek, coming right at you from the heart of Trekland through Portal 47 for a little bit of sanity and clarity and the big picture in all things Star Trek, as we do every Tuesday about this time. Thanks, everybody, for being with us. Hey, yeah, some somber days this week. But first of all, I would be remiss if I didn't say happy Black Box. Happy Star Trek Prodigy Day. Debut week. Eve. Double Eve. It's Prodigy week. And I feel like I'm doing a commercial for Motorific Speedway track or something. From the 60s. I'm going to unbox this sucker a little later and look for that later on. But I want to, of course, mention Prodigy is coming. A lot of people are excited. A lot of people with kids and grandkids are excited to see Prodigy coming this week. Yay and upbeat. There have been all kinds of teasers out there. We talked about Prodigy a lot last week, too. Can't wait to see this burst upon the scene. And then, of course, we've got Discovery coming up in another month. But you know what? Prodigy, in case you forgot, Prodigy is an animated series. It's our second one, our third, counting the original classic TAS. But after Lower Decks, it's the second animated series coming along. And there are a lot of problems, a lot of issues, a lot of special things to deal with in animation versus live action, of course, obviously, by definition. But one thing that Prodigy will hopefully never have to deal with is the kind of thing that happens on a live action set like America and a lot of the world has been gripped with this last week after the accident at this low budget Western Rust in New Mexico. And, Alec Baldwin is the high level profile name, but there's going to be an investigation. Bits and pieces are coming out from the local sheriff's department there. It's a tragic accident. One that the industry has been set up to prevent. The recent ones of the last 20, 30 years, shooting accidents have been on sets, have been well detailed. The accidents in general on set, everything Vic Morrow on Twilight Zone to Bruce Lee's son. But it feels like there's been a while. The industry has stepped up. The armorers, the prop people, the prop masters, all the different unions and guilds that deal with dangerous, stunt folks, all the dangerous aspects that can go wrong on a set have, over the years, had reforms and things put in place, procedures, just ways of doing things, just the way you approach safety in planning as well as on the day of shooting. That's all been part of the industry for a long time. So what's got people boggled this week is, how did this happen? And it's emerging that, yes, there were corners cut. It's a low-budget feature, and I've been around lots of those. People do cut corners, but hopefully, technically, you would think that safety was not... Whatever the scale of the production, the safety ought to match that scale and be beyond. And besides this, even beyond this being a low-budget, an independent movie, not shot in Hollywood, I'm not saying against the hinterlands outside of LA, where the film industry has sneaked away to the last few decades. There's just the set that people were cutting corners and union crew folks had walked away. We're getting problematical, again, hearsay until it's said down in the court of law, but we're having affidavits, police reports filed about people involved having issues in the past, or just being relatively new at the jobs. Not going to go into details there. Everybody can read about it. This isn't about Rust and the accident. We've all been dealing with that. But it does bring to mind several things that happened there. Independent production maybe lacks oversight. Things depending on one person, other people not speaking up, people from LA and Hollywood, or yes, Vancouver or Toronto. But people used to a certain standard, and they take it for granted that that's the standard they're going to be working with. Not thinking that things are taking a shortcut here and there, much less loosey-goosey attitudes and procedures. And we've got a tragedy. We've got the tragic death of a up-and-coming talented director of photography and an injured director. and an industry that is reeling. And an industry, interestingly enough, remember, that came very close and still might, depending on the vote, coming to a strike, not so much over money, but yes, this is borne by the streaming revolution. I mean, there are hundreds of hours of live TV now made that were 10 years ago were not. There's a lot more money in the pipeline. People are paying for it on the front end. Where's that money for, the blue collar of Hollywood? And that's what IATSE is, International Association of Theatrical Stage Employees, I think. But it's just IATSE. But it's all the different, whatever it is that you're below writers, directors, and actors. Almost all the guilds have a unit within IATSE. And as we so very, very famously came close to a strike, a settlement that in the light of day, people have wondered if it's as good as it could have been, given that this is a striking point moment. This is a unique social time right now with the pandemic, with all the different social movements that have come up, and this whole attitude about work and labor and respect for work. And that was a big chunk of what the IATSE strike was about. Too long in hours, breaks during the day, all the things that used to add to almost the mirror universe of glamour for Hollywood, right? You'd have, and it's on Star Trek too. That you only got a certain amount of hours to turn around before you had to force the call and make it earlier and pay people extra money. In other words, if you run late, you have to give people 8 hours. But if you commute an hour into work because you're not getting paid enough to support living in Hollywood, then you're on the road 2 of your 8 hours. So you're only got 6 hours. And that's just a microcosm. That's just one kernel here of what's going on. But even that one little plank here in the problem defines a safety issue. And Hollywood, aside from being a badge of honor, those 16-hour days we had, or the stunt days on Friday, because then it could get into Saturday and there was no call the next day. So they could run 2 and 3 and 4 in the morning. We've heard the actors talk about that, much less the crews. Well, you survive it. It's like, your band of brothers, you banded together in wartime, but did you really want to band together with war as the banding moment? It would have been nice to have had something else, to bond with over. That's, to a lesser extent, that's the same way, the industry can be to people. It burns people out, ruins families. All those were issues that IATSE was trying to bring after 100 years. That's just the way Hollywood is. Stars get paid big, and we're just here to make that happen. And there's been a reawakening about all labor in all industries, or it's in the midst of awakening. We're seeing that play across. And after all the social movements, the civil rights movement, but especially the Me Too movement and BLM and Stop Asian Hate, all these social movements have a kernel of work involved. And we saw, especially during the pandemic, the way some industries were treated. The meatpacking industry, for one, in the Midwest, just top of mind, but so many other ones that we started calling essential services and still treated them like dirt. But the country depended on them to keep functioning. Can we pay them more than lip service? That's a lot of IATSE's guilds are that way. And many times we've had a death on a set. And that was a stark example of cutting corners on safety. Somebody slipped up somewhere, and that will all come out in the wash. But it made me think also at the same time, this is a Star Trek show. We are talking about Star Trek. And by the way, gang, if you are new, I didn't say this, but if you're new, I was feeling this and I wanted to get right into it. But if you are new to us here on Tuesdays Live, I am going to get to the chat in a few minutes. We'll take a short break. It won't really be a break. We'll do the Parrot Analytics ratings for digital TV and for the States. And then I'll get to your chat. I don't know if I'm stirring anything up or not. But I wanted to turn all this to Star Trek because I started thinking back over the years. I don't know if it's been luck, but what I'm really going to think it is the Star Trek productions of all the eras. And I'm not as familiar. We haven't had everything come out in the wash here, just having the stories be told. And somebody may have heard something recently and told me, but I'm thinking at least for the original series in the Berman era, things were pretty accident-free. Now, I can think of a few things that happened, and whether they were just completely an accident or not, that's things happen. You can't guard against the best of intentions, the most conscientious following of procedures things are still going to happen, but you try to minimize as much as you can. And yes, we've had deaths. A lot of you remember seeing memory cards from Gene on down for various deaths. And there have been some things that happened around the lot. But again, Star Trek's been fairly clean. For one thing, Star Trek gets a great break as opposed to what happened at Rust and so many other, especially during the era of the Westerns. And it was the 50s and 60s and 40s, and things were probably a little loosier than that. And I'm sure there are stories from that era. But as far as becoming more modern, at least from the 60s and network TV onward, as Desilu Paramount was with the original series, things in place to guard against that. And especially by the 80s, by the time we get to Next Generation and everything that followed. Look, we've had... Star Trek gets such a great buy because what are we doing? We're pew-pewing with phasers, right? And it's squibs, the little explosive bits on people's clothing when you have a phaser hit or a burn. Not so much with phasers as live ammo, supposedly, or modern guns. But still, squibs were a part of, burn marks on uniforms were a part of Star Trek, even if the beam was going to be animated in later. If nothing else, Star Trek and sci-fi, time traveling. So like Spectre of the Gun. On the original series, one gun's fired, right? Very limited. Next Generation, not a Western, but episodes like The High Ground, where you had terrorists, anti-terror cops on Rudia 4. They're doing, squib guns. There's some kind of explosive in those weapons, even if they're prop weapons, they're rigged, right? Sometimes they're actually real guns adapted. And an armorer, a prop specialist, can talk about all that. A fistful of data on Next Generation. We're using old guns. As far as I know, no real accidents there. DS9, one episode, future guns that actually fired Armageddon game. The burp guns that the people that attacked Bashir and O'Brien's lab. And then, yes, the SWAT team at the end of Past Tense came in and attacked the Sanctuary District office with quasi-future, is 30 years in the future guns. Not really remembering or thinking or hearing about any firearm-related issue there. Burp guns like that on Nemesis, not the movie, but on Voyager, remembering. And yeah, North Star on Enterprise, a Western, not so much with gunfire, but it was a concern. And you could certainly have prop guns that were accidentally, it would be ridiculous and a ridiculous abandonment of protocol. But all those situations where you had not solid plastic or self-lit phasers that we don't have to worry about this. There's a chance for blanks and live ammo to be part of the situation, even as an accident. And we got through those episodes. Now, for the most part, I believe, pretty well. Of course, safety cuts across many areas on a set, aside from the weaponry or the potentially live weaponry. Stunts are another situation. And back in the old days, I think everybody's familiar with nothing else. Poor Eddie Paskey, who was our favorite Mr. Leslie. Eddie just recently passed away, but he tells a story about he had to leave Star Trek after years of being Shatner and Kirk's stand-in double, and then his own character in his own right, and even getting some lines. But is there in truth no beauty when Spock goes manic? And there's the fight on the bridge, and Eddie gets thrown over a railing and lands on his back badly. Okay, well, it's a workers' comp case there at work, but it's the 60s and 70s, and you don't make a big fuss about it. And all those kinds of injuries like that. The ones that really come to mind of those, kind of a combination of a prop and a stunt situation, are on Cupid, when Jonathan, somebody hit him with a staff that was supposed to be a breakaway staff, in the whole Robin Hood fighting. And it was not a breakaway staff. And he had a cut in the nose and didn't realize it. And they had to take him to the hospital. He missed out on some of the shooting over in Descanso Gardens. We'll take you there if you want to go. The other one that's as famous is no firearms, no props involved. It was flesh on flesh when a stunt between two regular actors went wrong. The famous fighting between Sisko and Ducat, Mark Alimo and Avery Brooks, and the finale of DS9. And very famously, Avery broke Mark's nose midway through, their final meet off, their final, fight there in the fire caves in the finale, climactic moments. And he had a big bruise or broken nose and swelled up, and they had to do makeup and come back and shoot the scenes later when it all went down. Of course, it wasn't intentional. Avery didn't mean it, but it was a slight misstep. It's the kind of thing that hopefully, even when that happens, isn't fatal. But it just points up how accidents can happen, even with the best of planning, even with the most experienced of folks. Anytime you let regular actors get into stunt work, no matter how much they protest them, and some of them are good. Some of them are good. Some folks maybe started off as stunt folk, studied more and more acting, and were able to secure parts and do more legit acting up front. But there's a whole range of things. We've had situations, and we've had our losses at Star Trek, though. Usually, it's announced with a card, and usually it's almost always been a medical issue, not an on-set issue. I knew Duffy Long, who had a long battle with AIDS and died during DS9, worked with the writers. He shares a card. He and Ronald Smith, who was a hairdresser, who was just not close to retirement, but he was 65, he suffered a heart attack and died at home, not related to the set, but both of them died, and the series honored them with a title card, as they had done Gene. Another one, though, this is more labor-related, though. A second assistant director. He's had a long career since, thank goodness. But Tomasz Remek, early in Next Generation, was coming in and commuting into work early for the early hours that Hollywood has, and had an accident, had to leave the show, but was able to recover and worked for a long time on Charmed, and has a long career. But another grip, basically the Hollywood word for stagehands, but a grip who worked on DS9, 39s, I think he was, Derek Graff, lived in Modesto, which is 4 hours north of LA. And because he lived so far away and commuted once a week, he would come down on Mondays, stay the week, and then go home on Fridays. And he's up on that Monday drive. He's up in the middle of the wee hours to get down to LA ahead of the traffic inbound, and to make early calls for the set. And in a foggy morning, collided with another vehicle that had stopped in front of him and lost his life. And he did have a card in the beginning of the two-parter, Sacrifice of Angels, I think. It's the third season. So yes, Star Trek has suffered losses. Some of them have been marked on screen, but thankfully, none of them really with a lapse on set. There have been accidents. Thankfully, they've been very few and far between. We've had professionals running every aspect, all the departments. A lot of safety prep goes in. If you see when they go on location, just the bits we have in the call sheets and the location maps, all the do's and don'ts, even warning folks, don't wear your cologne. We're going to be out with bees. And speaking of bees, one of the earliest incidents I can remember like that is just reading about Susan Oliver being stung by a bee during the shooting of The Cage down at the Culver City Desilu. Now, 40 acres, not 40 acres per se, but they're on the stages nearby. So, yeah, we're lucky that Star Trek, like so many other industry productions, not only are aware or even over the years help build the safety protocols, whatever it attends to, whatever department it's from, they pay attention. And being a union and a network or a studio show, all the syndicated show, Next Gen and DS9 the same way, paying attention to and planning and communicating all of the safety protocols, all the things to expect, everybody doing their job, no shortcuts. And we've been pretty blessed. Obviously, the best first AD in Hollywood, Jerry Fleck, who'd been a longtime veteran and worked with Jonathan on both of his TNG movies, as well as late Next Gen through Enterprise, Voyager and Enterprise as a first AD. Great guy. Everybody loved him. He was a hard worker and got the stuff done, and died of his sleep of a heart ailment, undiagnosed, during Enterprise. Much about the same way and the same time as the actress Kelly Waymeyer, who was Nurse Cutler, Ensign Cutler on Enterprise. Was a shock. Those are always a shock. But again, those are health issues. They're a loss to the cast and crew community. Star Trek being very, very fortunate and lucky. But a lot of that is you make your luck. You make your good fortune by ticking the boxes. And it's obvious, and the truth will keep coming out, but it's obvious that what happened on the set of Rust in rural New Mexico, urban county there, I think it's Santa Fe, rural area, with non-union folks, with local workers brought in when some walked off the job over safety concerns. Lots of red flags going off there, and people not paying attention to them. And sadly, you can have justice, you can get to the bottom of what happened, but it won't bring back those lost. Hopefully it just makes everybody else even keener about what's happening, and hopefully it empowers people who aren't inside the safe protective gates of standard shooting in LA or Toronto or Vancouver or wherever you are. Wherever is filming spreads around the country, and there might not be the ingrained, weighty way of doing things by the book, by standards, and things, there's more of a temptation to cut corners and go cheaper. Hopefully this will be a lesson to everyone wherever they are to, keep a safe set and respect one of the big reasons for the strike there, or the almost strike. And another light that we look at all of our heroes in front of and behind the camera at Star Trek, and do another salute. And if someone else has another story or a memento, I was doing my firsthand brain as well as researching, and not been able to talk to behind the scenes folks so much with Discovery and Picard so far, or even Strange New World. But first, I just wanted to lay that out there. Acknowledge that this is more than a train wreck fascination here with another tragedy. This has got a lot of people thinking, and it's so tied back into what nearly caused us. One of the big reasons behind the strike going on in Hollywood was safety, and again, not just live armor on set or stunt pieces, but this whole thing about work hours and all the things that can cause fatigue, and in turn a different kind of shortcut taken on set. People not being at their best. It's all part of the big picture. It's all how we want all industry to work. And if we're in a renewed era of the worker, I'm all for it. Feels like it's been about 40 years out of whack. Alrighty then. Hey, hang on. First, I want to make sure and thank all of our TTLers, our Patreon folks. The Patreon is folks sending us $5 or $10 a month. We've got a very simple Patreon, a way you can help all kinds of creatives with what they're doing by a project or ongoing. Mine is patreon.com Trekland Live. They take it out at the end of the month. It's a little bit like a PayPal billing, but it's their own system. So once again, I want to thank Blaze K, Robin Wilson, Lawrence Todd, Anne-Marie Siegel, Keith Rombach, Justin Porteous, and Nathaniel Robinson for being in the TTL Club, as we call it. And hey, our live wires, thank you, Rusty Harold, Halbjörn Gunn Johnson, Jalen Bullock, Robert McLean, Alan Hoensi, and JC Poole, and Casey Shafsky. Thanks so much, guys, gals, and peeps, for doing that. I also want to break a little news today. Can I do that? Or at least finally tell you the news. You want to be here on this channel so you know where our Zoom will be the night of. I can finally say this. Yes. The 6th anniversary, 6 years of Portal 47. We mark it with an open house every year. This year, our anniversary guest is the one and only Mike McMahon, the creator and showrunner of Lower Decks. Mike's wanted to do this for a couple of years. We've finally been able to make it happen. Open house is the time of year, the one time a year when we open the Portal guest night, our telebriefings to the public. Everybody come on in, just register, get a ticket. That way you're also not just there and have a head count, but you're in for the door prize and whatever other merriment we do. We'll have a mini version of our round table, kind of an open night situation. We'll have Portales there, but mainly this is for everybody else to get a taste of how we do things in the Portal, at least our live events. It's at 7, our normal Portal telebriefing time for our live events. That's 10 Eastern. I know, and it's bad for the Europeans. I know. This is why we have a special European roundtable, just for everybody else outside the States for better hours. So yeah, LarryNemecek.com/open house. Okay, pretty simple. Just go click in, leave me your name and email. You're good. Then you'll get the emails with the Zoom and more information. You can also, please and thank you, do send in questions for Mike early. Now, we'll have a conversation. I run interviews the same way I did all my interviews for my books over the years. And Mike knows that. So that's why, even though Mike's had even 1 or 2 long hours with some other folks, there's nothing like a Dr. Trek interview. We're going to get behind the scenes. We're going to get to the nuts and bolts, the roots of Lower Deck. And yes, still have time for lots of specifics because there's lots of things I want to know and I haven't seen anywhere else. But then that's the story of my life. Amazingly, I found 6 or 8 people in the world who feel the same way I do. So that's going to be a lot of fun. Make sure you get over there. Even if you're on my mailing list already, even if you're a Portales, even if you're a regular here on Tuesdays Live, or you're a lifer with us on Life Support Live, I need everybody to go over and register for your free seat ticket. For one thing, that way you're in the drawing pool for the door prizes fresh. Got it? Okay. Very excited to finally be able to say this. And Mike's excited too. He knows what he's in for. Alrighty then. So a quick reminder that yes, the Trek Files is up for this week. It's an odd one. If I said rat infestation and Star Trek, what in the world would you think about? It probably wouldn't even help if I said Gene Roddenberry and 1965. But yes, that's our episode this week at the Trek Files, where all fine podcasts are caught. You can find it. Also, podcast.roddenberry.com and also facebook.com/The Trek Files. Our page on Facebook is where we actually put out the paper. And you want to see the paper this week. We're basically rummaging around Gene's mailbag right before Star Trek was a thing. You don't want to miss that. You don't want to miss it every week if you could. And something else you don't want to miss, if you can make it, is our Life Support Live on Saturday mornings, 10 a.m. Pacific, or 1 Eastern, 6 UK time, 7 Central European. Dr. Ali and Dr. Larry, Dr. Trek, I should say. One of us is a real doctor, and we go boldly through uncertain times. We're mixing some mental health and daily living tips with geeking out on Star Trek for our examples. And this week, we will take our pointers from the debut of Prodigy. But don't worry if you don't see Prodigy. We cover all the franchise. We get around to all the series as we suck all of that up into our discussion. You have a lot of fun. And our Lifers group is pretty wacky. You want to be there, just like today. And I have a screener for the reviews too. So, but I haven't watched those. I'm saving a lot of that for my 5.5-year-old granddaughter. In fact, I may do something creative. We're going to see how that pans out. Anyway, look for an unboxing video of that Behemoth later on today or early tomorrow. Meanwhile, if you're leaving us right now live on YouTube, or if you're leaving us later on YouTube, then please stay healthy. This thing is not over with yet. Please do all the things. Stay woke, be open to new information, and check your sources when you do get it. I've had things in my own feeds popping up lately. Go check it. Oh, look, they've posted nothing and have 3 followers, and they've been around for 2 months. But they're so vehement. They're so vehement in the comment thread. How have they never posted their own original post before? Wow. Yeah. That's what I mean by check the sources. I guess what I'm saying is lots going on, lots to do, lots to look out for. So please, trek well, everybody.